post-war, austerity-riddled Britain. You can only imagine how dreary and dismal the motoring scene must have been, one might say. But was that necessarily the case? Well, the card to my right puts up a good case that there were still some fun and interesting and enjoyable cars available in that rather interesting time in our past. Hello and welcome to the Standard 8. Yes, today you join me in this rather pleasant day, in this rather pleasant setting, with what looks like the picture on the front of an old-timey postcard, with this, a 1955 Standard Super 8 Saloon. We're going to have a proper look around this thing, inside and out, and then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what I think of it, the history of the model, and then sum it all up. So let's crack on. Now, for enjoyers of the modern motor car, the standard nameplate might not mean too much, but herald back a few years, a few decades perhaps, and Standard was a serious contender in the British motor scene, a force to be reckoned with, one might say. They'd built quite a name for themselves, building larger, more opulent premium cars, things like the Vanguard. However, post-World War II, I think they realised that probably wasn't going to fly. Britain was firmly in its austerity period and needed smaller, slightly more reliable and definitely cheaper transportation. So John Black was at the helm of Standard at the time, and he realised he wanted to get into the rapidly emerging 8 horsepower smaller market. He wanted one thing, a car that had 4 doors, was cheap to run, looked good, but most importantly, was cheaper than a Morris Minor. Their automaking chums over at Triumph had tried to do something very similar with the Mayflower and to an extent failed. It wasn't ever a really popular car, but that just motivated John Black more. And so in 1953, the Standard 8 was born. It wasn't the first time the 8 nameplate had been used. No, that was with the Flying 8 of the 1930s. But this, which we consider the third generation of the 8 nameplate, was made from 1953 until 1959. The task of designing the Standard 8 was given to Vic Hammond, and he did a rather splendid job, one might say. The first and early generations of the Standard 8 looked very much like this, but a lot more basic, which was the key. They needed to get it cheaper than a Morris Minor, and that meant compromising on a few things aesthetically and in the amenities and creature comfort side of things. For example, the early cars didn't even have radiator grills. They just had a slightly aerodynamic cowling. They had vertically sliding windows, and at the rear, you didn't even get a boot lid. You got a small panel like this where you could slot in a spare wheel, but if you wanted to get into all this cargo space, you had to fold down the rear seats and access it from inside the car. That was almost unheard of at the time. It was something that would take on later on in the automotive industry, but at the time, a very clever bit of thinking. But just because it was basic didn't mean it was primitive. Especially not underneath. No, the Standard 8 was quite an advanced thing mechanically. They borrowed a lot of tooling from different factories and previous projects, but all of this was pretty much developed new for the Standard 8. There was independent front suspension with a double wishbone setup, incredibly advanced for the time. It was a unitary body construction, and all 4 wings, front and rear, could be removed for ease of repair if there was damage or something like that. It was a very well thought out car overall, a real testament to the folks over at Standard. The Standard 8 would be something of a success, with buyers of around 136,000 of the things being sold between 53 and 59 when it was produced. As production went on, things started to get a little bit more lavish. You've got 2 wipers instead of 1, a radiator grille, and winding windows as standard. There were a few different trim levels, with a rather rewardingly basic one right at the bottom, going all the way up to the Standard 8 Gold Star. This particular example is a Standard 8 Super or Super 8 Saloon, which means it has things like a heater and other wonderful goodies. Now, just because it's basic doesn't mean it's unpleasant in here. Quite the opposite, in fact. Now, these seats are wireframes with upholstery and very minimal padding front and rear, but they do remain rather comfortable. At the front, I've got a 2-spoke steering wheel and a real assortment of controls, and by assortment, I do mean about 3. I've got a horn, I've got heated controls, what with this being a higher spec car, and then a few other little bits here and there. There's not a lot going on in here, but you don't need that. If you're just after some cheap transportation in the 1950s, what else could you ask for? I've got slightly upholstered door panels, winding windows on this later car. There's a lot to like in here, though there isn't a lot overall. And here lies the important bit, the engine. What we're looking at here is an 803cc overhead valve 4-cylinder engine, good for around 26 horsepower at 4,500 RPM. Not that performance figures are particularly relevant with this engine. What's quite interesting is that although they had to use pre-existing tooling and a pre-existing block to an extent, a lot of the parts that we're looking at here and the engineering and sort of all these internal gubbins were actually developed pretty much just for this Standard 8. As I said, mechanically this was quite an advanced car, and as such it's got a good little engine under the bonnet, I must say.
Now, it is the warmest day of the year, and in this Standard I work it out to be about 42 degrees, so I apologise if I look like I'm a little bit on the sweatier and the warmer side. I absolutely am, but I'm committed to the cause, so let's get it out on the road and see what this Standard 8's like to drive. It's a wonderfully charming thing. Even in this hot weather, it's performing quite well. It's not a fast car, an 800cc four-cylinder engine's never going to break any land speed records, but it's nippy enough, and for the time it was probably quite a nice little cruiser. 26 horsepower give or take. I can get up to, I don't want to say modern speeds, but I'm cruising along at 40-45 miles an hour very, very comfortably here. Heat aside, it's a comfortable place to be. These seats, though somewhat basic depending on who you ask, are actually quite comfortable. They're holding me somewhat well. There's not exactly a lot of side support, but I'm not doing the breakneck speeds where I'd need that. The bases, front and rear, are actually just very comfortable. They're quite nice and spongy overall. It's not particularly exhilarating, but it's very charming nonetheless. It's very nostalgic. I must say I'm particularly impressed by how good the suspension setup is on this car. I know it was a particularly advanced thing, especially for the era and for a budget car, but when you get behind the wheel, you know, it's a very concise and sharp thing. There's not a lot of body roll. It's very much point and shoot, and dynamically, perhaps not power delivery wise, but dynamically, it's a very nice, sharp and somewhat advanced thing for its age. Independent front suspension with a double wishbone setup. It's ever so sophisticated, and that really translates quite well in the corners. Obviously I'm not going into the corners particularly fast because I haven't got any power to begin with, but on a lovely country road like this, it's nice and quiet, the windows are open and the breeze is starting to flow. It's quite a nice, enjoyable driver. Overall, I find the little Standard 8 quite a pleasant driver. It's easy enough to use and operate. Nothing's particularly heavy. There's plenty of visibility even through these wing mounted mirrors. It's a very well set up car dynamically. As I said, the suspension is rather sophisticated and good. It's not fast, but the brakes are sharp, a 4-speed manual gearbox. It's all very rudimentary, and it makes for a nice, enjoyable driving experience even in this warmer weather.
So then, the Standard 8 Saloon, what do I think? What are my thoughts? Well, it's a very interesting car. Perhaps it's not the most exciting, it's definitely not the most exhilarating to drive, but it represents a very important point in the motor scene's past. It had two real jobs: to be cheaper than a Morris Minor and to be good, and I feel like it ticks both of those boxes comfortably. It was £40 cheaper than a Morris Minor when new, and even this, the slightly more lavish Super 8 Saloon, was only £609 when it was new in 1955. I think there's a lot of car for the money here. It's a lot better to drive than I was anticipated. I thought it would be rattly and unpleasant, and it's none of those things. It's actually very smartly set up. It's very advanced up in the front here. The suspension's great. It feels nice and tight even to this day, and that little 803cc engine is a lovely little gem. To many people, this might be a little bit of a nondescript, generic 1950s, 60s British saloon car, and yes, I can see where you're coming from, but spend a little bit of time with one of these and I think you'll come to enjoy it. It's got a lovely level of charm to it. In this particular colour, it looks rather dashing, I might say. I enjoy this car. Would I have one myself? I'm not sure. However, I could recommend one if you were looking for a just very simple, nice and easy, usable classic for the summer show season. Have a look at a little Standard, because they're getting thin on the ground, these. Overall though, it gets a thumbs up from me. Thank you very much for watching the video review of our lovely little Standard 8 here. I do hope you've enjoyed. If you like this sort of thing, please check out our other video reviews. And remember, if you have a classic car to sell, please get in touch with us.